Game Day on Gamecock Central Radio. Welcome in, everybody. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell getting ready for South Carolina and Tennessee. 7:30 kickoff on the SEC Network. And Wes, Gamecocks coming off a bye week, starting to heal up a little bit. The great news for South Carolina this week is that DJ Wanham, top sack man and top tackle for loss man from a year ago, returning from injury. He has not played since the third quarter of the Coastal Carolina game. And A.J. Turner returns at running back, key special teams player as well. Two guys that the Gamecocks really need, and this should help South Carolina tonight against Tennessee, Wes.
Yeah, it absolutely should. And I think you probably had a number of other guys on the roster that have probably been playing banged up as well, as you almost always do. So having the week off, having a chance to sort of reset mentally and reset physically is always good. It's always big during the bye week. And certainly no bigger returning player than DJ Wanham, who, I think you probably before the season, if you were to list maybe 5 guys that you'd say, South Carolina can't afford to lose this guy, DJ Wanham is probably on that list for about everybody. So they couldn't afford to lose him. They did. When that injury first happened, nobody really knew that it was going to be this long. But, I've actually experienced that exact same injury, and that thing is very, very tough to come back from because you just have no ability to plant on that foot and to change direction. And for a guy who that's a big part of his game, even though he's a big man, that's a huge part of what he does on the defensive line for South Carolina. And they've certainly missed him, and couldn't happen any sooner, for them. I think that this is a pivotal game for both of these programs. It may not be a top 25 national type, matchup, but as far as South Carolina goes, as far as Tennessee goes, this is a massive football game.
Wes, how effective do we believe Wanham will be? Is he 100%? Is he ready to go? Muschamp was asked that same question during his midweek press conference this week, and he said he feels good, but he didn't really give a definitive answer.
Yeah, I think that's something where we'll have to see just how he looks like he's moving around out there. In my experience, those things right there, you're not really ever quite 100% until you just take a long, long time off. But certainly if they've cleared him, which they obviously have, he's close enough to 100% to where he's going to be fine and able to go. And, I think it's a situation where he brings so much to that defense. It's not just, you mentioned the pass rush and the tackles for loss, and he's a big part of those things. But just the experience, the ability to set the edge in the running game, the mentality that he brings, and the football knowledge that he brings to the field for a team that at times has struggled with miscommunication on defense. So I think having DJ Wanham back just provides so many different qualities to your defense that they were missing.
A.J. Turner returns from injury as well, Wes, and he's a player that I think Gamecock fans in particular have come to appreciate more and more as the years have gone by, not just as a running back, but as a special teams player and just a great effort guy, good hustle player. The Gamecock running game can always use a little bit of help, and maybe Turner brings a little bit extra punch tonight.
Well, I think the thing about A.J. Turner is he's almost always sort of been that third running back, but then every single time he's been called upon, he has responded and played very well. And in many cases, he's been able to spark the offense. I think, I always look at games year over year. What happened when South Carolina played Tennessee last year in Knoxville. And that was a game where they really struggled offensively in the first half. That was a game where South Carolina lost Rico Dowdle to an injury. Dowdle looked okay in the first half of that game, then he got injured, and it was the running game provided by A.J. Turner that I would argue was the difference in that football game last year. So Turner, when he's been called upon, when he's been needed, has always come through. And I think probably one of your more underrated guys on this team because he's never really talked about when we talk about the top players on this team. But he has a way of energizing that unit. He has a way of pushing the other running backs as well in practice. And to me, your football team is always better with an A.J. Turner on it. Even if he's not your first or second running back, having that chance to get him on the field when he's fresh, maybe the defense is worn down as well. he almost always seems to find a way to spark your team. So I think it actually looked to me like they wanted to get him the football a little bit against Texas A&M before he went down with that concussion.
Yeah, Turner just seems to impact the game in a positive way for the Gamecocks, so he will be a welcome returnee tonight along with DJ Wanham. South Carolina 3-3 overall, 2-3 in the Southeastern Conference, Tennessee 3-4 and 1-3 in the league. The Gamecocks coming off this 26-23 loss to Texas A&M 2 weeks ago. Carolina had to bye last Saturday, so the Gamecocks are getting healthier. Jake Bentley, one of the players, is probably in better health right now, West, and he's been in some time. He talked about not just Wanham and Turner getting healthier, but some other players that have been nicked up. Bentley's one of those, certainly. So the off week has helped the Gamecocks rest up and heal, and Carolina ready for an important home game tonight. First night game at home this season for the Gamecocks. South Carolina opened as a 7.5-point favorite. That line has moved to 8.5 now. For Tennessee, Wes, they got trucked by Alabama last weekend, their 12th consecutive loss to Alabama. But everybody's getting trucked by Alabama, so no real surprise there. And 2 weeks ago, I think the much bigger story when Tennessee went to Auburn and beat the Auburn Tigers at Jordan-Hare. That seemed to have rejuvenated the Tennessee football program, Wes, and given them a good feeling around their program that they haven't had in quite some time.
Yeah, it did. And I think you're always looking for a marquee early win if you're a new coaching staff at a particular place. And, that was a game that very few people gave Tennessee much of a chance of winning going into, and they were able to beat Auburn. And, this is a Auburn team that's really struggled this year. I think has not lived up to their billing, but still nice win for Jeremy Pruitt and those guys. Gives them something to sort of to build off of, especially when you consider that losing streak that they had going against SEC teams that really was just unheard of for a proud Tennessee program over the years. Now, certainly, I think last week with Alabama, something that I think always plays into your favor if you're, an opponent, is that anytime you're playing the team the week after they play Alabama, it seems like you're gonna run into a pretty banged up football team, and sometimes a dejected football team. So I think that not necessarily that Tennessee is a dejected football team, but they certainly are a little bit of a banged up football team after having to basically play the closest thing to an NFL football team that college football has to offer.
No doubt about that. 58-21, Bama whipped Tennessee last weekend. So 12 straight wins for Bama over Tennessee, and the Vols come to Williams-Brice tonight for a 7:30 kickoff on the SEC Network. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell here on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. We will be joined later in today's podcast by Brent Hubbs, who is with VolQuest.com. That's our Rivals Network partner covering the Tennessee Volunteers. Brent will give us the Tennessee perspective on today's show, and he'll also give us Volunteers' keys to victory, and we'll have Gamecock keys from our staff writer, Collyn Taylor. Let's get a look at the rest of the SEC schedule today. Noon kickoff on the SEC Network for Vandy at Arkansas. We got the CBS game this weekend, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. 3:30 kickoff for Georgia and Florida in Jacksonville. Georgia opened a 7-point favorite. The line's down to about 6.5 right now. And Wes, this game obviously will have huge implications on the SEC East.
Yes, it will. And I think a game that really hasn't maybe mattered as much the last couple of seasons, and now all of a sudden it's a huge game again. And I think, frankly, the SEC East is better when this game matters a lot. And I think the job that Dan Mullen has done there at Florida has been impressive. Georgia, all of a sudden, frankly, looks a little more beatable than they did at one time after what LSU was able to do to those guys. They don't really look like a perfect football team. So that's an intriguing matchup, man. I'm actually very curious to try to check a little bit of that one out as well.
4 o'clock kick today for Kentucky at Missouri. Texas A&M, Mississippi State, 7 o'clock kickoff on ESPN. That'll be a good ball game tonight as well. Wes, talk about Kentucky, Missouri for a moment. I was surprised that Kentucky's a 7-point dog in that game.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think basically you have a Kentucky team that I think really still is the team we thought they were. I think they're a good football team. They're a good defense, certainly, but now they've got some trouble at quarterback, and I think that we saw early on if a team could really force Kentucky to go beat them in the passing game that, that they were going to struggle to win. And certainly South Carolina, if you look at that matchup and how the game played out, the Gamecocks weren't able to do that. But I think you look at Missouri, maybe their ability to throw the football around, combined now that they've got a decent rushing attack as well. I think maybe the matchup there is that, okay, Missouri's a team that's going to score on pretty much anybody. Can Kentucky sort of keep the pace against the team that can actually go score? I was a bit surprised about that as well, but to me that would be the logic there, potentially to why they are favored like that, because Kentucky's a team we were just very recently talking about as being a potential contender in the East.
Yeah, and Kentucky's still very much alive in the East. That's a huge game for the Wildcats. And, Kentucky's playing good defense this year, and we know they can run the football very well with Benny Snell, and Missouri is not very good at stopping the run, so that just kind of surprised me a little bit to see Missouri favored by 7. So that's your look at the SEC schedule today. Wes, let's talk about some matchups in this Gamecock matchup with the Volunteers tonight, and we'll start with the Gamecock offense. A lot of talk about quarterback for South Carolina, West, and I think, we've established at this point that Jake Bentley's the man for the Gamecocks, even though Michael Scarnecchia played very well in his one start against Missouri a few weeks back, but Bentley's the man, and the Gamecocks are going to need him to play well tonight against Tennessee. The last 6 meetings in the South Carolina-Tennessee series have been decided by 6 points or less. Wes, this game is always close, and, one play here or there could determine the outcome tonight.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and, this Carolina offense, I think, needs to start fast. That's something that, we've seen this year. Carolina, when they've started fast, that's typically been a pretty good indication of how the game was going to go. And when South Carolina's offense has started slow and turned the football over early on, that's also been a pretty good indication of how the football game was going to go. So, I think you look at all 3 of their losses, and they kind of have something similar there. And you're talking about a Tennessee team that has struggled the last couple of years. I think this is a game that South Carolina, matchup-wise, should win. But at the same time, like you said, these games have all been close. The fact that the game is in Columbia, I think, is huge for South Carolina. We talked last year a ton about how you never know what's going to happen when South Carolina goes to Knoxville. Almost impossible for Carolina to blow out Tennessee in that stadium. And sure enough, one of the worst Tennessee teams we've seen really in a while almost beat South Carolina. And it took a goal line stand for the Gamecocks to hold on and win that game. So certainly this game has been close in recent memory. And, if you're South Carolina, man, you don't want to give Tennessee the ammo of being able to say that they've beaten you in year one of that coaching staff. You want to sort of keep that edge. You're already having to deal with Georgia. You're already having to deal with Florida possibly being on the rise. Certainly Kentucky, everybody listening knows what Kentucky's done against the Gamecocks recently. So if you're South Carolina, you have to find a way to win this game because of what it would mean to potentially lose to Tennessee in year one. So, but to me, like I said, that it goes back to starting fast as the South Carolina fan base that, it's homecoming weekend. They'll be looking for a reason to cheer. They'll be looking for any reason to cheer, but I think they'll also be looking for sort of that whole here we go again mindset as well if something goes bad in the beginning.
All right, it's the 37th meeting all-time between the Gamecocks and Vols, a series that dates all the way back to 1903, and Tennessee leads 25-9-2 all-time, but it's only 9-6-2 in favor of Tennessee in Columbia. But the Gamecocks have won 6 of the last 10, Wes, and I think it's interesting to point out as well that the Gamecocks have only played 6 overtime games in the history of the program. 3 of them have been against Tennessee. Tennessee won all 3 games by 3 points. But, crazy how close this series has been, particularly in the last, few years. And the Gamecocks playing at home at night for the first time this year. The crowd should be pretty well lathered up for a 7:30 kickoff. That's always fun, Wes. And I know fans are happy to be playing at night for the first time this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's always sort of special when you get that chance to go under the lights, both for the players and for the fan base. You get to go out there the tailgating is not abbreviated like it has been at other times. And, to me, those are some of your best atmospheres. And I'll tell you, honestly, the Tennessee-South Carolina rivalry, to me, has always just sort of been a fun game. It's always sort of been a special game.
Yep.
It almost always falls on Halloween weekend, and the color schemes are perfect for that as well. South Carolina will be in their all-black against Tennessee's orange. This series just fits on Halloween weekend, I think. And you actually, to me, are also starting to get your first real taste of fall. Hopefully there'll be good weather for the game. But I think that you get that sort of true football feeling as well. And always something special to me about this football game.
Will Muschamp, 6-0 all-time as a head coach against Tennessee. He was 4-0 against the Vols with Florida, and he's 2-0 against Tennessee with the Gamecocks. Carolina won 15-9 last year in Knoxville. Gamecock defense had 7 sacks in that ball game and had to come up with a goal line stand at the very end to hang on to win that ball game. Wes, what is it about Muschamp against Tennessee? The Muschamp defenses in his 6 meetings against the Vols have held Tennessee to under 300 total yards of offense in 5 of the 6 meetings. And I wanted to talk more about the Gamecock defense with you here, Wes, as we look to matchups against the Tennessee offense. Carolina's last 2 opponents have kicked 9 field goals. So talk about Muschamp, what he's doing defensively, and why it's been successful against Tennessee in particular.
Yeah, and I think certainly it's a new coaching staff at Tennessee, and he was able to do a lot of those things against Butch Jones, which I think sometimes one coach has another coach's number, and that certainly seemed to be the case between Muschamp and Butch Jones. And I think you look at the key pillars that South Carolina builds its defensive philosophy around, and great red zone defense has always been one of them. And I think that's something that they practice more than most teams. They believe in situational practice, putting your players in a position to practice over and over and over situations you're going to see in a game. And playing defense at the 50-yard line is very, very different than it is playing defense at the 10-yard line because of the spacing and the angles involved. So just having good situational awareness down there is something South Carolina's done a good job of. And frankly, that's kept them in football games.
Yep.
They were able to win the Missouri game because of that. They were able to stay in the Texas A&M game because of that. So, forcing field goals has been big for them this year, even with the 3-3 start. And that's going to be key for them, I think, down the stretch as well. Can they keep up that pace? I don't know. But if you're South Carolina, you're also hoping that maybe even if that pace doesn't continue, that the turnover part of the equation, which was such a big part of what they were able to do for 2 straight seasons under Muschamp and hasn't really been what they want it to be so far this year, I think they're very, very hopeful that, that'll be a bigger part of the equation down the stretch. And then certainly tonight, man, I think you look at this Tennessee offense against South Carolina's defense. This isn't a Tennessee offense that does anything really too exceptional. Honestly, you look at the stats, they're last in the SEC in rushing offense. And this South Carolina defense, I think, showed progress against Texas A&M. I think this defense also plays much better against the run, against offenses that are more methodical, like a Tennessee or a Texas A&M, than they do against these sort of fast-paced teams like a Missouri, for instance. So Tennessee also not really an offense that does anything really particularly weird scheme-wise or out of the ordinary. They're going to line up. They're going to be under center. They're going to do some shifts. They're going to audible a bit against you, but it's nothing really new aged or anything like that. So to me, all those things really matchup-wise favor South Carolina. Tennessee also is without its starting left tackle for an offensive line that has struggled anyway. So if Tennessee's getting chunks of yardage in the running game against South Carolina, that's a very bad sign for this game, because I really think it's an opportunity for Carolina to sort of shut them down.
Wes, maybe the number one strength of this Gamecock football team here in 2018 has been third down defense. Last year, South Carolina opponents converted almost 40% of third down. So, the Gamecocks really struggled to get off the field last year. But this year, it's been a remarkable improvement. Texas A&M, 3 of 13 on third down conversions 2 weeks ago at Williams-Brice. And for the season, Gamecock opponents have converted only just under 25% of third downs. And again, that's the fourth best mark in the country. So what have Will Muschamp and Travaris Robinson and the staff and the players done to improve that third down defense? That's a remarkable improvement, Wes.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it goes back to similarly to what we said about the red zone stuff, is just situational defense, having an understanding of where the sticks are. Maybe playing a technique just a little bit different based on knowing where the marker is and knowing where you have to get that defender stopped, or that offense player stopped, So I think that's a sign of good coaching. That's a sign of players buying into what their coach is doing. Also, a lot of times, the best way to be good on third down is to be good on first and second down. So I think when South Carolina has been able to get into those third and long situations, they've actually done a pretty good job of getting off the field and rushing the passer. And, this isn't a team that the stats probably back that up as far as sacks go or anything like that. But to me, when they've gotten to third and long, even if it hasn't been a sack, there's been pressure on the quarterback. He's been affected. He's had to either throw the ball away or he's had to scramble. He's had to try to make something happen. And I think a lot of that is good preparation. When you get into those third and long situations, you want to have a handful of play calls, of pressure packages that are designed specifically for that situation and specifically for the blocking scheme of your opponent. And I think this defensive staff does as good a job as any that I've seen, because I think every time you watch it, if you're listening, you pay attention to the third and long situations. When South Carolina's on the field defensively, there's almost always somebody coming free on a rush. And to me, that's a sign of good scouting from this coaching staff.
All right, we're still going to hear from Brent Hubbs from VolQuest.com. We'll get a look at the Tennessee perspective and keys to victory still to come today here on Gamecock Central Radio. So let's go ahead and throw it over to Brent Hubbs and talk about this matchup with South Carolina and Tennessee from the Tennessee perspective. Brent Hubbs with VolQuest.com joining us here on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Brent, Tennessee took it on the chin against Alabama like every Alabama opponent this year has. So I don't think anybody was particularly surprised by that. But 2 weeks ago, the bigger story, in my opinion, when Tennessee won at Auburn. And I think that, kind of turned prospects around for Tennessee. At least that's been the perception here in South Carolina. It was a feel-good win for Tennessee, the likes of which they haven't had in quite some time.
Yeah, no question. It was a big win, big confidence builder for the team. Now, obviously, you're coming off a loss to Alabama, but to go on the road at Auburn, to win a game like that, to have Jerry Garantano have a career day, put up numbers he's not put up before, to get some key defensive stops, create some turnovers, certainly a foundation or some bricks in the foundation, with, if you will, for the building blocks of Jeremy Pruitt's program.
So, Brent, Tennessee's played a very difficult schedule. Losses to West Virginia, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and that one key road win at Auburn. So talk about the season to this point. Where is Tennessee compared with maybe where they had expected to be at this time?
Well, I mean, I think basically you were hoping, if you're a Tennessee fan, that you could win one of those games in that 4-game gauntlet. Could you win at home against Florida? That certainly looked much more realistic after Kentucky won in Gainesville, but Tennessee played very poorly in that game. After that game, it certainly looked like Tennessee was going to be a 2-6 football team. And then people started wondering if the best they could do was 3-9 on the season. But you get the Auburn win, and it brings back in discussions of postseason play. Can you continue to improve and find those 6 wins? I said in the preseason with this team, judgment was not going to be in the records that this team produced because of the schedule they had. It was going to be how much did they improve and how much do they improve throughout the season. And the question right now is, was the Auburn game a blip on the radar, or was that tangible improvement that this team's made? It's an Auburn team it's hard to get a feel for right now. So we'll see. And that's why I think Saturday night here in Columbia is such a big game for both teams.
7:30 kick on the SEC Network. Gamecocks and Vols, last 6 in the series, decided by 6 points or less. Brent, how banged up is Tennessee after the Alabama game?
Pretty banged up, and that's a concern moving in. Of course, the big news this week is that Tennessee starting left tackle Trey Smith, an all-conference performer as a freshman a year ago, is out indefinitely with blood clots, something he's been battling since late February, 1st of March. Thought they had him all cleared up, and he was good to go. He's played in every game this season, but will miss this game. That's a big blow for Tennessee. The question right now is, what's the offensive line shuffle going to look like? Well, how many different combinations do they end up having to play on Saturday? Mike Abernathy at safety has not played in 2 weeks, did not play in the win at Auburn, did not play in the loss to Alabama. He has been out all week long. Looks like he's not going to be able to go this week as well. And Tennessee's missing a couple guys that they've lost for the season. Jonathan Kongbo tore his ACL in the Auburn game. Brandon Kennedy, the starting center, tore his ACL in the West Virginia game. A freshman defensive back who would factor in for Tennessee, Trayvon Flowers, is nursing a broken collarbone. He suffered during the open date on the practice field. He's probably 2.5, 3 weeks away from being ready to play.
Brent, Jared Garantano, the Vols quarterback, has put up pretty good numbers this year, completing 60% of his passes, and Will Muschamp in his midweek press conference this week said that when you turn on the film on Garantano, you notice accuracy with the deep ball. He's a good downfield, quarterback in the vertical passing game, and that makes him a real threat. Well,
he's got to get rid of the ball on time, and Tennessee's got to keep him upright. He's been knocked out of 2 games this season after getting hit really hard in the Florida game. He was banged up and knocked out of that game, and then he did not make it through the first half of the Alabama game. He's very sore this week, and we'll see how he can go on Saturday. The biggest thing he's done with the deep ball from an accuracy standpoint is he's just kept it in the field to play and let his receivers go up and make plays with back shoulder throws. And that's something that Tennessee exploited at Auburn when Auburn was playing a lot of man-to-man defense, particularly in third down situations. We'll see how Will Muschamp counters that this week and what he elects to do in terms of how he wants to challenge Tennessee defensively. Tennessee's had a hard time running the football, so we'll see what kind of balance Tennessee can get. Garantano's definitely better than he was a year ago. He's improved. He's got more confidence in his game. Again, he's taken too many hits, and that's something this offensive line has to find an answer to against the Gamecocks at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Will Muschamp 6-0 all-time as a head coach against Tennessee. Brent, and in 5 of those matchups, he's held the Volunteers to less than 300 yards of total offense. So what is it that Muschamp and his staffs have done against Tennessee that have been so successful?
Well, I think they've done a good job getting pressure on the quarterback in third downs. In years past, they've been, good against the run. They're not as good against the run as they've been in years past right now. But they're doing a great job getting off the field on third downs. And I think that's what he's done the best against Tennessee is he's gotten off the field on third downs, and he's forced some turnovers through the years with some very talented defensive players. And we'll see again how Tennessee can handle South Carolina's pass rush with Wanham being back and what they're getting out of the Bryson and Allen and all that off the edge. So Tennessee's got to find a way to protect, and that's been a big issue. They're giving up it's kind of feast or famine for Tennessee. They give up a big play, and then they'll turn around and give up a negative play. They're on track right now to give up right at 100 tackles for loss this season. They've got to play much better in the offensive line because one would expect Will Muschamp's defense going to rev it up and come after Tennessee pretty hard.
With the injuries and the uncertainty on the Tennessee offensive line, Brent, what will the Vols do to try to keep Garantano upright? Is there additional concern about pass protection this weekend?
Well, I don't know if it's additional. I think it's been a concern all year long. But, yeah, obviously with Garantano banged up, they certainly would like to keep him in the game. Now, they've got some confidence in Keller Chris, who led Tennessee on 2 scoring drives against Alabama and looked good. I think the biggest thing is Garantano has to help himself. He's got to get the ball out of his hand quicker. I think Tennessee would like to do some stuff in the quick game with their passing game off a 3-step drop. They've tried to max protect. They've struggled in max protection. When they bring 7 into the box, defenses are bringing bodies with them, and Tennessee's had a hard time picking up some things that way. When they've gone empty, which evens out the numbers and makes it a little bit more one-on-one, get it out of your hands faster, Tennessee hasn't always won at the line of scrimmage with the receiver position, or they haven't always blocked it well enough up front. So there's room for improvement. And Tennessee played well against Auburn. They made some key plays against Auburn. They still were, they lived in third and long all day long. They completed 70%, converted 70% of their third and 8 yards or more, which is an unheard of number, and it's a number that's very difficult to duplicate. So Tennessee's got to win on first down to try to keep some of the pressure coming, because I would imagine if it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, Will Muschamp's coming with pressure.
Yeah, Gamecocks have been outstanding getting off the field on third down this year, the 4th best third down defense in the country this season for South Carolina. So, Brent, talk about strength and weaknesses for the Tennessee defense so far this year.
Well, I think the biggest thing they've done is they've gotten better. They've gotten better in learning Jeremy Pruitt's system, a system that's proven to work. It's worked everywhere he's been, Alabama, Florida State, Georgia. And he does a good job breaking it down and trying to keep it simple to get some guys on the field early. The biggest difference for them in the Georgia and the Auburn games, where they played better and made the Georgia game was a little bit interesting to start the fourth quarter, and obviously they won against Auburn. They got pressure on the quarterback, and they were able to get to the quarterback. They sacked Fromm 3 times. They sacked Jared Stidham 3 times. They forced Stidham into some bad throws, a fumble, a couple of interceptions. And as a result of that, Tennessee was able to capitalize and score points. So they've been at their best when they've been able to get to the quarterback. They could not get to Alabama a week ago as Tua gets the ball out of his hands really fast, and they couldn't get him on the ground when they got near him. But when Tennessee's gotten pressure, that's a defense that's gotten better and has been much more productive.
6 straight in the series, decided by 6 points or less, so special teams play could decide this one tonight. Brent, talk about Volunteer special teams.
They've kicked it well. Brett Samaglio's missed 1 field goal this year. He's been really good. They've punted it pretty well with Paxton Brooks, who's and Joe Doyle being a young guy who's done most of the punting for Tennessee. Brooks has handled the kickoffs, but Doyle has punted it well and has done a good job flipping the field. They've done a good job in their coverage units defensively. They've done a very poor job in return. Tennessee's got nothing out of the punt return game this year. They've got nothing out of the kickoff return game this year. I would expect Tennessee's going to fair catch every kickoff that they can and get the ball to 25-yard line. And they've really fair caught most of the punts this year and just kind of started the possession there. They're not effective in the return game. Now, they've gone after some punts. They have a block punt for a touchdown, and they've been aggressive in that way. They've been aggressive in trying onside kicks. A couple of them they should have recovered that they didn't recover, but Jeremy Pruitt's been aggressive in that regard, taking chances there. So Tennessee's kicked it well and actually kicking the ball. They've covered kicks well. They just have not been very effective in the return game.
Both the Gamecocks and the Vols sitting on 3 wins right now, and we've talked about bowl eligibility concerns for both teams. How important is this game for Tennessee tonight, Brent?
I think it's big. You look at the rest of the schedule. You got Charlotte next week, and then you've got Missouri, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. So there's still opportunities to get to 6 wins, and you think the Charlotte game should be a win. That should be number 4, and so where are you going to find the last 2? Vanderbilt's struggling a little bit, so you think you might have a favorable matchup there, but then where's the other one going to come from? Who's the best matchup for Tennessee? So this is an opportunity game for Tennessee. I think there's more pressure on South Carolina to win this game because they're not going to reschedule the rain-out game. It doesn't look like, and if they don't, then where their 6 going to come from? This is a home game at night against an opponent that you're favored to win by. So I think the pressure is on South Carolina to win more than it is on Tennessee. But from a Tennessee perspective, I think this is an opportunity to get a win. And Tennessee's been a better road team than they have been a home team this year. So this is certainly an opportunity game for Tennessee. And as I think most of you guys over here believe, it's a must-win game for South Carolina.
Good insight today, Brent. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
That's Brent Hubbs with VolQuest.com, our Rivals Network partner. Good conversation there with him, Wes, and he does a great job covering Tennessee. And, we're excited about the matchup tonight. We haven't really talked about both teams kind of struggling to get bowl eligible, Wes. Both teams sitting on 3 wins. And the winner tonight obviously, takes a big step toward getting bowl eligible. We know Tennessee needs it badly because it's Pruitt's first year. they would like a couple extra weeks of practice and, a month of preparation time for the bowl game, even if it's not going to be a big bowl, a high-profile bowl. And obviously that'll be pivotal for South Carolina as well, Wes. The Gamecocks have gained momentum under Will Muschamp since he took over, and they need to keep it going this year.
Yeah, and I think, dude, Emerson, we've probably talked about, like, swing games all year long, I feel like. Every game is a swing game for South Carolina. But, you start looking ahead at this schedule, and, you start trying to pick out wins for South Carolina and saying, how does the schedule sort of play out? And I think, with a win for South Carolina today against Tennessee, then that gives you 4. And I think we can probably count 2 more with Chattanooga and with the makeup game. I think we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves to do that. So then you're talking about there's your 6 wins, there's your bowl eligibility. I personally, and some of our members on the site, I think, disagree with me. I still think the trip to Ole Miss is very, very winnable. Ole Miss, awful team on defense. They can't stop the run to save their life. I think that's a great matchup for South Carolina, particularly if they win this week and have momentum as opposed to being in a bad place. So, to me, winning against Tennessee is your difference in, I think that gives you 6, probably 7 wins, and then who knows what could happen in Gainesville if South Carolina goes down there a confident football team. Now, a loss to Tennessee this week, then all of a sudden you're talking about scratching and clawing to get to bowl eligibility. You're talking about going to Knoxville, possibly not in a great headspace mentally as an overall football team. And you're talking about the very real possibility, I think, of being a 5-7 football team. So to me, the rest of the season and being able to, like you said, use the word momentum, continue the program's momentum. If they, after starting 3-3, can finish the regular season with 7 wins, with a shot at 8, or just 7 regular season wins and a shot at 8 in the bowl, then you at least still have something that I think you can build off of. Missing a bowl or just winning 6 games really sort of sets you back, I think.
All right, it's time now for Keys to Victory, and for Gamecock Keys, we'll send it to Collyn Taylor, staff writer with Gamecock Central.
Tennessee's has a little bit of an inconsistency on the offensive line, so I think for South Carolina, they're really going to want to dial up the pressure, get to Garantano if he's in there. I don't think he's going to be 100% after taking that injury, so you're going to want to get after the quarterback. You're going to want to get to play in the backfield, which I think is a big key. If that defensive line's on with Kinlaw and Sterling and especially Wanham, that's going to be big because Tennessee's really good at their downfield passing. So getting to the quarterback and disrupting that timing is going to be big. And offensively, I think we say it every week, but you have to run the ball. A lot of what South Carolina does is predicated on running the ball and that opening up a lot of things for guys like Deebo Samuel and Brian Edwards to make plays down the field. So I think if they can do those things, then South Carolina should come out with the win. And I think it's going to be close. This game always is, but I think South Carolina ends up pulling out a victory.
Thank you very much, Collyn Taylor, staff writer from Gamecock Central. Let's now get Tennessee's keys to victory, and we'll go back to Brent Hubbs with VolQuest.com.
For Tennessee, I think offensively they've got to protect Jerry Garantano on the quarterback position. Tennessee's got to find a way to run the football a little bit to keep South Carolina honest. So that would be the big key for me, Tennessee offensively, is what do they do up front with the offensive line? They're going to shuffle again this week. Can they find enough push? Can they find enough protection to let Tennessee's playmakers, Ty Chandler, Jawan Jennings, go make some plays? On the flip side, defensively, I think they've got to force Jake Bentley into some mistakes. They've got to get him to throw the ball up, and when the opportunity presents itself, Tennessee must capitalize on those turnover opportunities. I think the other big down for Tennessee is can they get South Carolina in third and long situations? So Tennessee's got to win first down. Finally, I think the red zone's important. South Carolina's been very good defensively in the red zone, forcing teams to kick field goals. Tennessee's got to, if they get in those red zone opportunities, they've got to find a way to muster up a touchdown, not settle for field goals. And conversely, Tennessee has struggled to stop anybody in the red zone. They've got to try to keep South Carolina out of the end zone, force them into kicking field goals if South Carolina gets into the red zone. So those are some keys on both sides of the ball for me.
Thank you, Brent. That's Brent Hubbs with VolQuest.com, our Rivals Network partner. Wes, what about the makeup game December 1st? We talked with Chris Clark earlier this week here on GCR, and he said that if Marshall is not in the Conference USA Championship game, which they're in the running for right now, it will likely be Marshall coming to Williams-Brice on December 1st. So is that what you're hearing? And if it's not Marshall, who might it be?
Yeah, if it's not Marshall, I'm not sure who it would be. Like you said, the big holdup on that is just that we have to make sure they're not going to be in a conference championship game. And right now, how long can you wait to see if they are or aren't? Because if it goes down to the final couple of weeks of their conference schedule and they're still in the running, then that's going to be sort of past the point where South Carolina needed to make a decision, because you can't just plan a football game in 1 week. So I think that'll be the hang up or the hold up there. We'll be seeing how well Marshall does. I think there's a handful of other teams that I'm not privy to the names of right now, but that are out there. But South Carolina plans fully to find a way to have that 12th game and obviously, get the fans back out for a game and try to add another, let's be honest, add another W to the win column.
Damn right. Yeah, the Gamecocks might need that game. Might need a win on December the 1st to become bowl eligible. So we'll keep you posted on all this and a lot more here on Gamecock Central Radio. Wes, good stuff today. We're excited to be playing at night at home. Gamecocks involved is always a lot of fun. Halloween week. Let's get it on tonight.
Hey, let's do it, man. We'll talk to everybody again next week.
All right, that's Wes Mitchell, and I'm Emerson Phillips. Thanks for joining us for the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Enjoy the ball game, friends.